This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
French President Emmanuel Macron seeks forgiveness for Rwanda genocide, but falls short of a direct apology. Thousands flee DRC's city of Goma as fears of a second volcanic eruption mount. And Mali military leaders have released arrested leaders following an international outcry. Hello and welcome to you wherever you're joining us to Africa Live only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also joining me in studio with your business headlines, it's Ramanya.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Headline inflation in Zambia has risen to its highest level in nearly 2 decades. And we'll explore how global e-commerce brands are racing to take advantage of explosive growth in South Africa's growing online shopping space. We'll have the details on those stories and plenty more coming your way in about 30 minutes. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
Rama, thank you. We begin the top of the hour in Rwanda, where French President Emmanuel Macron has acknowledged his country's role in the 1994 Rwanda genocide and sought forgiveness at a remembrance event in Kigali. For his first public stop, he visited the genocide memorial, where he has said his country was complacent in the killings. The genocide has been a major sticking point between both countries. President Paul Kagame has repeatedly accused France of aiding in the atrocities. Macron's visit, which is the first by a French head of state since 2010, looks to reset relations between both countries. In a joint press conference, President Kagame said Macron's words were, quote, more valuable than an apology. Here is CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa with more.
President Emmanuel Macron arrived in Rwanda on Thursday morning. Together with Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, he headed to the genocide memorial site in the capital, Kigali, where 250,000 victims of the mass killings of 1994 are buried. 27 years after the Rwanda genocide, Macron acknowledged his country's responsibility in the genocide, but did not offer an outright apology.
27 years of bitterness have passed. 27 years of incomprehension, of a sincere attempt to get closure that was unsuccessful. There were 27 years of suffering for those whose intimate stories remain raw because of the pain of the memory. And so, with modesty and respect, as I stand by your side today, I come to recognize our responsibility.
Over 800,000 ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed by Hutu militias in 100 days of killings that began in April 1994. Macron's visit follows the release of a report by a French inquiry panel that said a colonial attitude had blinded French officials and the government bore a serious and overwhelming responsibility for not foreseeing the slaughter. However, the report absolved France of direct complicity in the killings, a point Macron also made in his speech.
The killers who stalked the swamps, the hills, and the churches were not French. France was not an accomplice. The blood that was shed has not dishonored the hands of its soldiers. They themselves saw the unforgettable as they tended to wounds and choked on their tears. But France has a role, a history, and a political responsibility in Rwanda.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame hailed Macron's speech.
His words were something more valuable than an apology. They were the truth. Speaking the truth is risky, but you do it because it is right.
Rwanda has released its own report that found that France was aware that the genocide was being prepared and bore responsibility for enabling it by continuing its unwavering support for Rwanda's then-president Juvenal Habyarimana. It was the shooting down of Habyarimana's plane, killing the president, which set off the 100 days of killing. Macron's visit and acknowledgement is geared at helping to reset the relationship between the two countries. The French president is now set to name a new ambassador to Rwanda, the first accredited French envoy since 2015.
Fundamentally, this visit is about the future, not the past. France and Rwanda are going to relate much better to the benefit of both our peoples, economically, politically.
To discuss the COVID-19 pandemic and regional crisis, including one in Mozambique. Bulkizanyabwa, CGTN.
Right now, for more on this, we're joined by Ismail Buchanan, a professor of political science at the University of Rwanda. He joins us live now from Kigali. Professor, Macron gave a carefully worded speech, just stopping short of a formal apology, but also accepting France's responsibility for the genocide. How significant is that speech, would you say?
Thank you very much. I think the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, as you say, his words were very significant indeed, and at the same time, I found out as substantively strong. Why did I say that? First of all, he recognized his country's law in Rwanda, genocide, at the same time by hoping for forgiveness. So by quoting him, I can say that, as he mentioned, that I have to come to recognize our responsibility. That is the first step. Number two, I think when I quote him, when he said that only those who went through that night, which means the genocide, can perhaps forgive, and in doing so, can give the gift of forgiveness. I think that's what we're very strong to show that how President Macron were ready to ask for forgiveness. And at the same time, when he mentioned something, I caught from him that I hereby humbly and with respect standing by your side today, and I come to recognize to some extent our responsibility. So for me, those words were very strong and powerful. He did it in a substantive manner, and at the same time, we can say that those words were lauded with gravity and dignity, at the same time with the truth in it. So to me, I would say that by saying that really President Macron did agree to come to Rwanda and at the same time to visit the Kigali Site Memorial to apologize on his behalf and at the same time on the French involvement during the Rwandan genocide against Tutsi in 1994.
And Professor, Macron's visit is significant in that it is the first by a French president since 2010. What do the two countries then stand to gain by resetting ties?
That is a good question. I think looking at the visit of President Macron and what he mentioned in his speech, I will start by saying that the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, has, number one, promised to arrest any genocide perpetrators found to be living in France. So that is the first step to appreciate that. You know, so many times, many years has passed, different people who involved in genocide in Rwanda were staying in France, walking freely. So you can see that now, as far as Macron has taken a step to make sure they can chase out everybody who involved in the genocide who are living in France. That is the first step. Number two, I think a range of issues were being included, mostly investment and support for businesses, which means that they want to really raise the issue of having investors from France, as far as the Rwandan people are also business people can also go invest in France. At the same time, to me, as you mentioned something again, I think by appointing the new French embassy to Rwanda after 6 years without French embassy here, it is another milestone, which means having an embassy was one thing, a French embassy, but having ambassador also. What does it mean in the long run? This means that the bilateral cooperation between Rwanda is going really to be a truce, and at the same time with a permanent stay of ambassador in Rwanda, which can really open up the bilateral cooperation with Rwanda. At the same time, let me reiterate that the French embassy, the French government used to have what we call it culture central, which teach French language. So you understand it's going to be boost to have, once again, the boosting of a French language in Rwanda, even though we still speak French, but of course, after having quarrel with the problem with the French. So this was really a big problem, a big challenge. Of course, you know that we are using French and English, but by boosting French languages, of course, going to have a big title with that. So with this kind of bilateral cooperation, I would say that France is going to gain something in terms of business, in terms of investment, and also in terms of bilateral cooperation, both Rwanda and French.
Professor, thank you very much for speaking to us on Africa Live. That's Ismail Buchanan, Professor of Political Science at the University of Rwanda, joining us live from Kigali. Moving on, authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo have ordered thousands of residents living in the eastern city of Goma to relocate to other areas following a scientific report about the likelihood of another volcanic eruption. Tens of thousands of people have been forced to evacuate the city that was hit by a volcanic eruption on Saturday night. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more now from Kinshasa.
The military governor of Goma, Constant Ndima, has ordered people living in 10 states around the city to immediately relocate to other areas. His directive came shortly after scientists from the Goma Volcano Observatory warned of another volcanic eruption. Tens of thousands of people have started relocating to Sake in the western part of the city. 17 villages on the outskirts of Goma city were overrun by lava on Saturday night after Mount Nyiragongo erupted. At least 32 people have been reported dead and several others hospitalized following the volcanic eruption. The city has been hit by several tremors and earthquakes since the eruption. International humanitarian organizations have relocated most of their non-essential staff to other surrounding towns. The DRC government has offered aid to some of the people affected by the disaster. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, let's now shift our focus to Nigeria's Kebbi state, where about 156 people are reported missing after a boat accident in Kainji Lake. Authorities at the National Inland Waterways say the wooden boat, which was traveling from Niger State, was overloaded while ferrying passengers to a local market. A rescue mission is underway and so far 20 people have been rescued, while 4 are confirmed dead. Eyewitnesses say the passengers aboard were on their way to a market across the lake at a newly found gold mine. Boat accidents in Nigeria are common according to authorities. Bad weather, overcrowding and lack of maintenance are just some of the major causes. CGTN's Tesem Akende has more from Jos.
Nigeria's Inland Waterways Authority confirmed the incident, declaring 156 people missing, most of them traders. It attributes the cause of the boat capsize to overloading. Emergency officials say the boat was carrying more than 180 passengers when it should ideally only carry 80. Rescue operations by marine police and local swimmers are ongoing. President Muhammadu Buhari has described the incident as devastating and commended the efforts of the rescue team while expressing sympathy for the victims and their families. Tesem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Well, let's now head to Mali, where the former interim president and prime minister have been released. This comes after mounting international pressure to release the leaders. Both the U.S. and the UN Security Council had called for their immediate release. The U.S. had also announced the suspension of security assistance to Mali. The interim president Ban Dao and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane were detained on Monday. They then resigned from their posts on Wednesday amid ECOWAS negotiations. Colonel Assimi Goïta, who led the coup against former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, will now act as the interim president. He previously held the post of interim vice president.
There were deep differences both on the form and the substance which involved the operation of the transition. So that's why that in the end Mr. Ban Dao submitted his resignation letter. That happened in the presence of Mr. Goodluck Jonathan.
U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered intelligence agencies to once again look into the origin of the coronavirus. But the World Health Organization has already dismissed the theory of a lab leak in Wuhan as, quote, extremely unlikely. The world's top health body published its results from a month-long investigation in Wuhan this March.
The joint WHO-China study had come after a month-long study in Wuhan earlier this year, where international experts were in hospitals, markets, labs. They had also talked to relevant staff members, vendors, medical workers, and they found the scenario that the virus had leaked from the lab in Wuhan extremely unlikely. As Wuhan mission team members told CGTN back then that the report's conclusions were unanimous.
And when it came to the lab leak hypothesis, we just didn't see significant information that suggests that that happened. I mean, as a scientist, you can only deal with the evidence that you see in front of your eyes. And if it's not there, then you can only come to the conclusion that it's extremely unlikely, which is, by the way, a unanimous conclusion.
对，这个结论主要是在去调查访问武汉病毒所。
We visited the Wuhan Institute of Virology and some other laboratories in Wuhan. We spent a very long time investigating and talking with various personnel there, and we also had extensive discussions. This conclusion was reached after that, and it was agreed on unanimously.
Professor Tong, the co-leader of the Joint Team's Animals and Environment Group, told CGTN that the team of experts also advised pursuing further investigations into the source of COVID-19 in other places.
Do you suggest the WHO to continue trying to source it in other places in the world?
We do suggest so. Actually, the whole expert team agree on this.
Chinese Foreign Ministry had said multiple times this week that China has been transparent and fully supports efforts to trace the origins of the virus. Officials say they hope the study in Wuhan contributes to global efforts to spot and stem future outbreaks. They have called on other parties to work in the same spirit.
The United States keeps saying that China should participate in comprehensive, transparent, and evidence-based investigations. So we say the U.S. must follow suit in launching its own origins tracing research in cooperation with the World Health Organization in a comprehensive, transparent, and evidence-based manner. Such investigations will fully respond to the concerns of the international community.
Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Coming up after this short break. Speeding and non-adherence to traffic rules blamed for high rate of traffic accidents in Nigeria.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us on Africa Live. Now, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says having China's Sinopharm vaccine for the continent is vital in helping more people get vaccinated against COVID-19. It says the World Health Organization's approval of the vaccine for emergency use in May means there are now more options available for countries seeking additional doses of jabs. The United Nations Security Council has expressed concern that Africa has only received 2% of all doses that had been administered globally. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Ethiopia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Morocco and Senegal are among the African countries already administering China's Sinopharm vaccine. The Africa CDC says its approval by the World Health Organization for emergency use this month is timely.
It means that we have more options on the table to use in terms of rolling out vaccines. So we can only greet that development as a positive outcome and something that continues to be celebrated. I mean, I've always said that in this extremely unpredictable battle, we should be celebrating every little success.
In Africa, most countries have so far received the first batches of their allocations, mainly AstraZeneca vaccines from the WHO-supported COVAX facility. The majority of people on the continent have not yet received a vaccination. Many people who have had their first jabs don't know when they will get their second. The Serum Institute of India, which is one of the manufacturers of vaccines, has suspended exports because of India's major second wave of coronavirus infections. The World Health Organization is concerned that a small group of countries that make and buy the majority of the world's COVID-19 vaccines are now controlling the fate of the rest of the world. It says this is making high-risk groups like health workers miss out on much-needed immunization. It says the pandemic will not be over until transmission is controlled in every country globally, and it is therefore asking countries with excess vaccines to share them.
83% of the 1.6 billion doses have been used in high and upper middle income countries, which of course are about 50% of the global population.
Africa has received only about 38 million doses under the WHO-supported COVAX facility. That means slow progress towards its target of vaccinating at least 750 million people by next year. Beijing says it will supply vaccines to about 40 African countries. And Egypt has confirmed that it will start local production of China's Sinovac vaccines in June. The African Union is also banking on about 400 million doses from Johnson & Johnson that may begin arriving in July this year. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The Ugandan government is worried about the rising number of COVID-19 infections among younger people. Health officials say hospitals are overwhelmed as patient numbers surge daily. Authorities blame this rise in new cases on people's failure to observe COVID-19 prevention measures. CGTN's Michael Baleke has that report.
Uganda is battling a second wave of the pandemic. The country's health ministry says it registered over 1,000 cases in less than 10 days, with more infections and deaths in young people. Health officials say they have recorded over 800 cases and 1 death in schools across the country.
Our data shows that the most affected group this time, the age group, is 20 to 39 years old. And that during this period, the intensity of severe and critically ill COVID patients is higher than it was in the previous first wave of the pandemic.
Latest figures from the Ministry of Health show Uganda has registered close to 45,000 cases of COVID-19 and about 361 deaths. According to medics, most of these cases have previously been among the older population and people with underlying conditions. Experts are now investigating the new trend of infections in the younger population.
It is important to understand that the genetic background that makes the person who is 50 years old to have diabetes and hypertension is present with us even when we are young. So it seems that COVID-19 more or less excavates that background.
Uganda says it's now stepping up vaccination efforts to control the spread of the disease. Uganda has so far inoculated about 550,000 people. Health officials say the plan is to withdraw the jabs from low-risk areas and redistribute them in high-risk districts where the virus is spreading fast. In March, Uganda received more than 860,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines from India. But the shots, according to the Ministry of Health, are running out. This has caused fear among health authorities after India stopped exports of additional jabs in order to inoculate its own population as cases there rose dramatically.
The supply we were expecting in May hasn't come, and it's unlikely to come in June. So we are working towards seeing where we can get an alternative supply other than India.
The World Health Organization says Uganda and many other African countries are banking on donations from rich countries with excess vaccines. For now, health authorities are ramping up efforts to set up additional ICU beds and bring on board more health workers to cater for the growing number of patients. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's now turn to Somalia, where Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble says he is committed to free and fair polls. On Thursday, he signed an agreement with regional presidents to allow indirect elections. According to the deal, the elections will be held in the next 60 days. Roble and leaders of 5 other regional states will select members of the election committee. Somalia had initially planned to hold its first direct elections since 1969. However, it was postponed after stakeholders failed to reach a consensus. Moving to Nigeria, in a large city like Lagos, the country's commercial capital, getting motorists to comply with traffic regulations is quite a challenge. Even keeping pedestrians safe has proven to be difficult. Deji Badmus has that story now.
A city of over 20 million people, all confined within a land space of just 3,577 square kilometers. Many of them are always in a hurry as they try to move around, resulting in massive traffic jams. That's the long and short of commuting around Lagos, the Nigerian commercial nerve center.
Everybody wants to get to their destination at the same time. So that particular impatience is the major cause of the problem we have. And even when we have decency being restored, you still see some deviant drivers who are always outlaws that are willing to disorganize an already organized traffic situation. And we have the status of our vehicles too. Many of the vehicles are not roadworthy.
Almost all the major roads in the city have traffic lights, but because authorities know that traffic lights alone are not enough to guarantee compliance with regulations at designated stops, traffic officers are stationed nearby to ensure motorists comply.
Now, people believe that, if I move, every other person on the highway should leave the road for me. And that is why a number of our road users hardly obey traffic lights. And you see them beating traffic lights because they feel that they are in a haste.
Getting motorists to obey signals on traffic lights may be a challenge, but getting them to comply with speed limits is sometimes near impossible. Speeding on inner city roads is quite common and sometimes leads to fatal accidents.
Highest rate of cause of fatality in Nigeria today is due to overspeeding. As at last count, 2019 alone, about 52,000 offenders were arrested in Lagos. In 2020, about 35,000 offenders were arrested in Lagos, where so far I've been able to arrest more than 18,000 offenders.
We Nigerians were always in a haste. We want to get to a destination that we didn't plan for. And that is why in the Federal Road Safety Corps, we encourage every road user to plan your journeys. Whether you are moving from point A within a particular vicinity to point B, there's a need for you to plan.
Lagos is partly famous for many of its pedestrian bridges, but the pedestrians hardly use them. Take this situation for instance. Pedestrians crossing a major highway in the city and ignoring a pedestrian bridge nearby. Even barrier fences erected by the authorities to compel pedestrians to use the footbridges have all been destroyed, as people simply prefer to take the risk of crossing the road rather than use the pedestrian bridge. And quite a number have died while trying to cross a major highway in this manner. Worryingly, many more are still doing this, endangering their lives in the process. And one more thing, don't bet on it that drivers will stop for you at zebra crossings like this. It rarely happens. The drivers are always in a hurry. The only reason why this ones have stopped for me is because there's a traffic official around. Other than that, it just would not happen. And so when you find yourself at a zebra crossing like this, you have to be extremely careful while crossing the road. That's the way it works in the city. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's go to Guinea now to meet Kabine Kamara, an engineer who founded an association that works for the protection and promotion of people with albinism. Today, thanks to its fight, Guinea has passed a specific law to protect people with albinism.
4 years ago, Kabine Kamara started a group for albinos in Guinea. The group aimed to give them a space to interact with each other. Today, the group has 5 branches spread across the country.
We have also conducted awareness campaigns so that people can change their view of albinism. We had to organize campaigns for the distribution of school kits, from which 185 children benefited in the whole country.
But beyond giving back to society, Camara became a fierce advocate for the protection of people with albinism. After several years, his efforts bore fruit. In April, the Parliament unanimously passed a law which provided albinos legal protection.
In order to guarantee the protection of persons with albinism against various forms of discrimination, persecution and aggression, the Republic of Guinea shall opt for a legislative framework to ensure the promotion and protection of their rights. That is why the passage of the bill will allow a change in the behavior of the population towards people with albinism.
The law also looks to give them better access to basic social services such as health and education.
Under the provisions of this law, which has just been passed, we are interested in the people who are behind ritual crimes. In our society today, there are people who want to become rich. There is a myth about albinos, and some people think that albinos bring good luck.
With the bill passed, Cabinet Camara has moved on to his next goal. He hopes to conduct outreach programs to better sensitize communities about albinism, as well as help connect albino street children with orphanages. Astatal, CGTN.
The World Judicial Conference on the Environment has concluded in southwestern China's Yunnan province with a joint declaration to boost international cooperation. The event was held in the provincial capital Kunming, the same city where this year's COP15 conference will be held. CGTN reporter Ma Ke has more.
Over 160 representatives from the highest judicial institutions of 27 countries have jointly declared they'll boost international collaboration to preserve biodiversity, fight climate change, and prevent and remedy pollution.
The rule of law has an irreplaceable and important role in global environmental governance. Through open, transparent, fair, efficient, accessible, and affordable adjudication, we jointly promote green, low-carbon, circular economies and sustainable development, and work together to realize the vision of living in harmony with nature.
The document also specifies goals, including the use of precautionary judicial methods to put ecological restoration first if damage has been done, and facilitate public litigation on the environment.
The role of the judiciary in the effective implementation of the existing national framework laws, national biodiversity strategies and action plans cannot be underestimated. Sharing the jurisprudence, precedents, information and experience can support strong institutions that are essential for the environmental rule of law.
During the 2-day discussions, Chief Justices shared cases concerning air and water pollution, animal trafficking, the protection of endangered species, and the green economy. They found differences in each country's specific challenges, but agreed that handling environmental issues needs to be a global effort.
The restoration of ecology is a key issue for every country. We have over 100 laws and regulations to protect land, water, the air, and the ecosystem. In dealing with disputes between national laws and the international framework, fundamentally, we will uphold our national commitments first. That is our principle.
One of the greatest interests of this conference is to have a sort of overall approach. 2021 will be fundamentally decisive. We have the opportunity in 2021 to have an improvement in the field of biodiversity and in the field of fighting against climate change.
The conference is associated with this year's COP15 conference, which is also set to be held here in Kunming, capital of one of the most biodiverse regions in all of China. Ma Ke, CGTN, Kunming.
Well, it's just about time for all the latest in business. Raman Yang joins me back in studio with more.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business.
Headline inflation in Zambia has risen to its highest level in 18 years. And we'll explore how global e-commerce brands are racing to take advantage of South Africa's growing online spending.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in Zambia. Headline inflation has hit an 18-year high in the month of May as the cost of meat and fish pushed up food prices. Consumer prices rose by over 23% compared to a year earlier, compared to a rise of 22.7% in the month of April. That's according to Zambia's interim statistician general. Costs went up 2% in the month. Annual food inflation quickened to 28.5% in May from 27.2% a month earlier. Now, headline inflation has been well above the upper bound of the central bank's target range of anywhere between 6 to 8% for over 2 years now. It's expected to stay there at least until the first quarter of 2023. While the central bank said that last week price growth pressures will ease much faster and much earlier than expected, the governor of the Bank of Zambia, Christopher Mvunga, has warned that monetary policy committees may tighten their stance further down the line if the rate doesn't come down. Competition in South Africa's digital marketplace is rising. Global firms like Amazon, Wish and Shein are all growing rather rapidly in Africa's most industrialized economy. A growing number of consumers turn to online shopping during the country's hard lockdown in order to cut the risk of getting infected with COVID. As CGTN's Julie Shire now reports, however, whoever wins this market share race must first build a formidable logistical operation.
A 66% boom in online shopping in South Africa caught the eye of online global retailers such as Amazon, Shein and Wish.
That individuals who weren't previously using e-commerce or weren't shopping online were brought into the fold, per se, and were happy to start using e-commerce as a mechanism for buying products. And I think this extends from all the way from groceries, food deliveries, all the way through to your normal, more traditional e-commerce.
Local services such as Take-A-Lot, One Day Only and Superbalist have long dominated the market. Amazon and Shein are looking for bigger market share, while Wish has signed a delivery deal with the post office to grow its presence.
I think it's largely a battle between whether the existing players in South Africa and big players in South Africa can innovate as quickly as the international players can get their supply chains right. So while Wish is looking to solve for this international shipping thing and bring delivery times down from 3 months to 3 days, the Take-A-Lot, the MACROs and the other players are going to have to see how they can change from 3 days to 3 hours.
Increased interest from global players widens the market for consumers. It also presents opportunities for entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Small courier services have got massive opportunity at the moment to take up the slack because there is more demand than supply right now. So that'll probably create new opportunities for entrepreneurs, but also new jobs. It'll definitely enable people to be able to provide their services for deliveries.
The bigger opportunity might be something different, which is how does South Africa do the same thing, really? I mean, if China's been able to internationalize their supply chain and ship across the globe exceptionally quickly, how do we do the same thing from South Africa? There's thousands of businesses that produce products locally, which could be sold internationally.
The COVID-19 lockdown has sparked an unprecedented shift in consumer habits. I also prefer to shop online, where it's convenient and safer. But a little parcel like this does take a few days to get here, and the shipping costs are high. With growing competition, however, services are likely to become quicker, more efficient and cheaper. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
On to North Africa, Egypt's Suez Canal Authority says its revenues in April rose to over $550 million compared to $476 million in the same month last year. Now, the rise in revenues follows the resumption of movement after a massive container ship, the Ever Given, blocked the waterway in late March, causing an enormous backlog of vessels waiting to get through in what is the fastest shipping route at the moment between Europe and Asia. CGTN's Yasser Kim has the details from Cairo.
The Suez Canal April revenue numbers have increased 16% year-on-year and also posted a 20% hike compared to a month earlier. The canal has managed to endure the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on world trade in 2020, followed by the Evergreen saga in March, which caused the blockade in the vital waterway.
Suez Canal made profits in 2020 during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. An official report shows 18,380 ships passed through the canal with profits of $5.6 billion, although there was a recession in trade. This accounts for 12% of international shipping trade. Suez Canal is not only important to Egypt's economy, but the world economy as well, because it's a safe corridor that reduces the trip by more than 15 days compared to other routes such as Cape of Good Hope.
Meanwhile, the Evergreen vessel that got stuck in the corridor blocking trade in March is still held by Egyptian authorities, pending a court ruling on Cairo's demands for $500 million in damages. The Suez Canal Authority might be enjoying a recovery after the losses of the last period. However, there are challenges ahead for this important shipping route linking the eastern part of the world with the west. Talk has been intensifying over an alternative Russian shipping route from the North Antarctica, as well as an Emirati-Israeli land route to transport Gulf oil to Europe.
I don't expect a big effect on the Suez Canal. The Russian northern shipping route depends on global warming for defrosting the ice to allow ships access, so it's under the control of the climate change, which is not guaranteed. It's a good route between Asia and Europe, but not trustworthy in the long run. Concerning the other route, the normalization between UAE and Israel allowed for the new oil transport route. To counter this, there will be new expansions in Suez Canal corridor for 24 months. By 2023, we will see a new canal that is larger, will allow more ships through at less time, and which will prevent a recurrence of the Evergreen issue.
It's essential for the government that the Suez Canal revenue stream continues. Along with remittances from expatriates, the canal is providing badly needed hard currency revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has led to huge losses in tourism and slowed exports. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Away from the continent now, China says it's held constructive talks with the United States over the Phase 1 trade deal. China's Vice Premier Liu He spoke with the U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai on the phone on Thursday. It's the first call between the world's two largest economies' representatives on this issue since a Biden administration took office. In the meantime, China's Commerce Ministry spokesperson Gao Feng says that the Phase 1 trade deal, which came into effect at the start of 2020, is a net good for the rest of the world. He says the two sides should put in joint efforts to create a positive atmosphere and conditions to help facilitate the implementation of that deal.
With the attitude of equality and mutual respect, they had a candid, pragmatic, and constructive conversation. Both sides believe that it's important to develop bilateral trade. They also exchanged views on issues of mutual concern and agreed to maintain communication.
Let's get back into the business of inflation, this time though in the United States. Prices of various goods and services in the country have been going up of late. Lumber and wood, however, are among one of those things that have gone up by several orders of magnitude. And that's making new homes and home improvement projects a lot more expensive, as CGTN's Hendrik Brandy finds out firsthand.
My backyard fence, you can clearly see, needs some work, and not just a new coat of paint. In fact, a new fence may be in order. But is it something this journalist and his modest budget can afford? I decided to consult someone who does nothing but fix and build fences. Eric Panetta is putting up a new one in Brighton, Colorado, and says wood has been pretty hard to find.
I had a job a couple weeks ago. I couldn't find lumber. I had to
look around at different lumber yards.
Demand for lumber, he says, far exceeds supply right now, which can only mean one thing: higher prices.
For example, the 4x4s, you could get it for like 20 bucks. Now you're looking about anywhere from $30 to $45, depending where you go.
According to Random Lengths, a wood products industry tracking firm, lumber prices are up 67% this year and up 340% from a year ago.
I believe because of the whole COVID thing, you know, everything kind of just stopped, shut down.
The pandemic caused lots of people to work remotely from home, and that's led many of them with time on their hands and money in their wallets to turn to home improvement projects. Lumber tariffs had already caused price increases. Then lumber production slowed on the assumption the pandemic would cause housing demand to drop. Instead, home building, fueled by cheap mortgages, took off. How would you say this has affected your business?
I can't quote people for too long. I gotta constantly keep them within 2 to 3 weeks, because even the lumber yards, if I ask them for a quote, they tell me the quote's only good for a week.
That's assuming they have wood at all.
You call one place, they don't have it. You call the other one, they don't have it. You call the other one, they don't have it. It's so early in the season that it's just kind of like, what's going on? Like, when are you guys gonna get it? And nobody has an answer.
That lumber scarcity, Panetta says, doesn't usually happen until much later in the season. It will take a while for lumber yards to replenish their stocks and for prices to retreat.
Anybody that thinks that it's going to go down, I don't really believe it, but...
You think it's here to stay?
It's here to stay.
The National Association of Home Builders estimates surging lumber costs have added more than $35,000 to the price of an average new single-family home in the past year. And that fence of mine, I may watch the paint peel for a while as I wait for this market to calm down. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN.
Now, a select group of people can say they got a closer look to the supermoon than just about everyone else here on planet Earth. Well, except anyone who was on the ISS. These individuals are part of a special Qantas flight designed to give passengers a view of the lunar event from 30,000 feet. Here's Greg Navarro with that story.
Amid the crowds waiting for luggage and chasing down bags at Sydney's airport, one group of travelers emerged a little happier than usual.
It was fantastic, really beautiful.
They were among the 100 people who paid up to $1,160 for a seat on a Qantas flight created to give them a unique view of the supermoon.
There was no light pollution, so you could see the Milky Way. The moon looked spectacular.
If there was any doubt about just how much interest a flight like this might generate, consider this. This flight sold out in just 150 seconds.
I know, very fortunate to get seats.
1 second, you up there. It was the second of Qantas' so-called flights to nowhere, a chance for the airline to lure passengers during COVID restrictions. Airlines have lost billions of dollars during the pandemic, and Qantas is no different. Its CEO has called on Australia's government to open up international borders sooner than the middle of next year.
Australians have done an amazing job keeping the lid on COVID. Imagine if we were to put the same focus on the vaccine rollout. Opening up by the end of the year seems very achievable under those circumstances.
For passengers, the supermoon flight offered a chance to get back into the air.
Missing the actual flying and missing going to destinations.
It's something that they can talk about, you know, and say that we went out and looked at the moon from in the sky.
And free pillows.
Yeah, exactly.
And they landed with the confidence of knowing that, unlike most of the other fellow travelers, there was no need to wait at the end. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
I'll leave it there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be heading over to the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's Africa's largest copper exporter, but we'll be focusing on its commercial hub of Goma. It's facing a bit of a crisis. Thousands of people fleeing in the face of a looming volcanic eruption. We'll have the analysis on that from Kinshasa and London at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Mahia.
Rama, thank you. Well, still to come here on The Sport. The Portuguese city of Porto ready to welcome fans to Saturday's all-English UEFA Champions League final.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, after the dramatic UEFA Europa League final, attention now shifts to Saturday's UEFA Champions League all-English final, where Manchester City will battle Chelsea for the title. The showdown will be played in Porto, having been moved from Istanbul by European football governing body UEFA. The decision was made to allow English fans to travel under COVID-19 restrictions. Turkey is currently on Britain's travel red list, meaning that no fans would be able to attend the game. Manchester City and Chelsea are each allowed to take 6,000 supporters to Portugal for the final, with a change in venues allowing fans to attend without having to quarantine upon their return. On Tuesday, Manchester City owner Sheikh Mansour confirmed he will cover flight and transfer costs for a section of their fans to attend the final. Meanwhile, Portuguese authorities have relaxed COVID-19 safety rules for thousands of English fans coming to Porto for Saturday's Champions League final, no longer requiring them to stay in bubbles and lifting restrictions on movement. Metropolitan Police Superintendent Cardoso da Silva has said the two clubs had sent recommendations to fans to follow social distancing rules and wear a mask.
Borders are opened. We have many people in the city, including British citizens, and fortunately, after a very tough period for all, the city is opening little by little. It is important to continue